Welcome to the Two Regular Teachers podcast. My name is Rick Kaler-Thompson.
My name's Adam Lavaz. Thanks for joining us for episode 25 and on a beautiful summer's day. And Rick, I know this week at your school you've had three-way conferences, which seems almost a touch early in the term, if I might add.
Some people would think that, Adam. I'm sure not all schools do the three-way conference in February. It is the introductory conference where you're setting the platform, basically. Parents get to meet the teacher. Students share their initial learning goals. But as I mentioned on a previous podcast, or maybe I haven't, I've got the same class again this year because I've gone from grade 5 to grade 6. So it was sort of seeing all those parents again.
I was actually going to say that you would have had parents come in where you go, hey Dave, how you going? And you sit down and there's kind of that comfortable sort of feeling about it that you're talking to them, but they know who you are. They know they can trust you. It's a bit of a catch up. I love those ones. I must admit, the ones where you're meeting a new parent for the first time, where you've really got to be on your A game, can be quite intimidating still sometimes.
Sure, and I'm going to go out on a limb. Some people might understand this, particularly teaching in the 5-6 area, is that some parents you don't see all that much, and that tends to happen as they get older. In the early years, parents are quite present.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I had and this has happened in the past. Some parents who you don't see at all, then will come in for the interview, and they sort of want to traverse loads of topics that you can't quite fit into that time, and it becomes, because the idea of the three-way conference is that it's student-centred and the student runs it. Yeah. I talked way too much the other night. And
you feel it too, don't you? Sometimes after a few minutes you sit there and you go, in your head you go, I'm talking way too much here. And how much with parent-teacher interviews do you have to stick to the three-way conferences or parent-teacher interviews? You've got to stick to that timeline, because if you've got 7 or 8 parents in a row and you're 5 minutes over, you're playing catch-up. You can't then bring someone in and say, look, you've only got 5 minutes, do you? And those parents that want to talk about those topics, it takes up a lot of time.
Well, sometimes I concern myself with the fact that is it like my classroom door's not open enough? Is it that they have to wait till the interview to talk? And I don't think so.
No.
It's just an interesting. I'm not complaining. It's just an interesting thing. Well, I am complaining a little bit, but
just a little bit.
But
it's also, as society goes, that I think people are working longer hours, and the opportunity to come in isn't as prevalent as it used to be. It's mum and dad are generally working long hours, and you don't see as many of those stay-at-home mums or stay-at-home dads who have the opportunity to come in as much. So yeah,
it's a good point. So we've got a big episode today, a really big episode. We're almost coming into the middle of term 1 now, so lots of things are getting put in place, Adam.
How quick does that go?
Does go quick.
Flying.
Unlike this podcast, which is going to be nice and long.
It is very long.
And enjoyed by all.
well, we hope so. So what you could say, strap yourself in, mate. You want me to put that out there?
Strap yourself in.
So Rick, first topic for the night is something that I actually found really, really interesting, and sort of got my mind going and thinking about it in terms of what it is and actually getting my mind around it. And the article was, and there was actually an interview with Meredith Peace from the Australian Education Union about students being used to interview and hire teachers at Victorian schools. Now, we're both primary school teachers. Now, this certainly wasn't a primary school. I couldn't see a fresh prep sitting in going, do you like to colour? How many big teeth have you got? It's not going to be that sort of stuff, is it? It's definitely high school based. But I tell you what, as I read it, it really, I'm not sure if it frustrated me or annoyed me, but it certainly got me thinking, that's for sure.
My initial thoughts on the topic when I first saw the headline, Adam, and saw your idea for the topic was, why do students have to be involved in everything? Now,
fair point.
Controversial, perhaps, because that's why we're in the job for the students, but I got annoyed. I thought, because I'm all for students asking questions about our practice.
Sure,
all for that. I'm all for gathering feedback from students about the quality of our lessons. Sure, I'm all for that. But sitting in on a job interview, sometimes there's some things that you just have to rely on adults and the teacher. However, I read the article and I realised, as you said it in the intro, that it's talking about 3 Melbourne secondary schools that were doing it with VCE students. And did you want to elaborate a little bit on that?
Oh, look, the way I see it, I know you want to elaborate more on the fact that they're VCE students and what they can actually bring to it, but I want you to think about professional jobs out there. How many jobs would have a young teen sitting on the interview panel? Now, I know that we're going to get to talking about the fact that they obviously don't have the final say in who gets the job. But would you go for an accounting job or a PR job or an IT job or any sort of job there and have someone who's 16, 17 years of age sitting on that panel asking you questions? Now, I'm not saying they can't do a good job, but to me, it sounds almost a little bit demeaning.
Is it the equivalent of like having a customer sitting on the job like for a butcher and going, well, your sausages sound like they're rubbish. You know,
that's kind of what it is.
Sure.
I mean, even back in the day when I got a job at McDonald's when I was 16 years old, the person who interviewed me was in their mid-20s. You know, it wasn't another 16-year-old coming out going, so what do you think, and doing that, and you know, you still have to have that professional level to it. So I don't know, mate.
Yeah, I'm still wavering, and I was very passionate at the beginning, but it does say that and this is quite a big process for prospective teachers. These VCE students are on a separate student panel, so they're not sitting in with the staff panel. So they're actually conducting an interview separately with the teacher, and they ask questions. Well, it says that they ask the same questions as the panel, but some of the questions in the article were somewhat simpler, I thought, like what would you do with a difficult student who's disruptive? Now, we know some staff panels would ask that question, but that's quite simple.
Yeah. And look, I think, why can't a school gauge, you know, what students want in a teacher? They can gauge that quite easily and put that into the process themselves. I don't see the point of having a student panel. You got to sit through that panel and answer that, then have a teaching panel come in and go and sit through all that sort of stuff. Now, there might be people out there who disagree with me. You know what? I hope there is. But it just doesn't sit well with me, because I don't think it's as useful as some other people might make out.
I tend to agree with that, and I'm still leaning on my initial comments in the topic, because I'm just going to go back to a quote from Meredith Peace at the very end. There is a place for student input, but it should be fed into the process. Yes. So my question would be, the VCE students that are being selected to sit on these student panels, what sort of knowledge, or like what sort of knowledge has been passed on to them about what's required in terms of a teacher application? By the sound of it, are they just asking questions that they've come up with about classroom practice?
Are they actually reading their application? That's the thing. Are they getting these applications and going, well, here's John Doe, he's coming in for a bit of an interview, off you go, you know, and sit him in, and they got to ask him questions, and literally in 10 or 15 minutes on the spot make a decision. Now, I don't think students at that age level can be trusted to make a decision in that amount of time that an adult can make. Again, I'm not knocking 16 or 17 year olds who would sit on a panel. I really am not. But they don't have the life experience to me to be able to make that justify their decision. But
perhaps they could, and I'm going to play devil's advocate, perhaps, like, some of the things that students asked the teachers were, what's their proudest moment, what makes a good teacher? I guess, to defend just slightly, to play devil's advocate, they would get a feel. Like, if you had intelligent, motivated students on that student panel, they would get a feel for what that person is like. And let's be honest, you need that feel aspect for teachers. You need to feel comfortable. There needs to be that comfortable feeling with them. Someone could be really talented, but they just might jar with the whole ethos of the school.
Yeah, that's right, and that's a really good point. And I guess where I'm coming from too is that. When you and I have sat on interview panels before, you know, I've been on both sides of the coin. Getting an interview can be really tough, and it can really put you under the pump, and your knowledge and who you are and talking to referees and things can be what gives them that extra thing. And again, I just don't think students of that age in VC will be able to appreciate what it is, because again, it comes back to the life experience, and you know, it just I don't think it's as worthwhile as maybe some schools would like to make out.
So what do you think? We'll put the article on the blog, and we'd love to hear your opinion. Students on student panels. So Adam, for topic 2, over the weekend, I think it was, you and I both read an article, and the headline was "Teaching Degrees Fail to Get a Pass Mark." And there has been a review headed by the Vice-Chancellor of Australian Catholic University, Greg Craven, that was submitted to the federal government, calling for a whole revamp of university pre-service teacher courses. The big one saying that there should be a minimum cut-off of 70 for the ATAR score.
Yeah. And if we look at that in isolation, I think that's terrific. I think we've had the discussion briefly before about the fact that the ATAR and what is required to get into a teaching course, I think, is a little bit low. And having an ATAR score that's cut off at 70 and above will help to eliminate a lot of those people who just fall into a teaching degree. Well, I don't really know what else to do. The ATAR on teaching 61, I can fall into that and just do that. And we've heard it through the years of people doing that, and they're not as committed and they're not as keen, and it impacts across so many levels.
Some universities providing really bad courses. I mean, you and I believe we had a pretty good education.
Yep.
Because there's a quote that says that some unis like the review has recommended or stated that some unis may stop offering teaching degrees if this review gets accepted, and that would be a good thing. So that's saying that some of them must be absolute rubbish.
Absolutely, and they would have got that feedback from probably students, and they probably would have got that feedback from teachers. You know how you get a pre-service teacher and they come in and you've got the university and what they give you and the information and things. You know, they ask for that feedback. I know principals would give that. So there may be universities out there that just aren't cutting the mustard.
Do you think one of the recommendations is that and I'm guessing it's new pre-service teachers, the article just says new teachers, but let's say new pre-service teachers must pass a national test that places them in the top 30% of the country for literacy and numeracy? I tend to agree with that. I think
you agree?
Yeah, to some degree. I think we've got it, because it should be. This is what devalues our profession, is that we aren't calling for people who have strong literacy and numeracy skills to go into the course.
And while I agree with you slightly, Rick, I do want to come back to John Hattie's research about teacher knowledge of the curriculum, and in terms of a high-low medium scale, it does come in the medium to low range. And what he actually puts more emphasis on is the teacher's ability to connect with the students and provide an active, passionate and engaging classroom for the students to learn in. So a teacher's knowledge of the curriculum is not as important as what they can bring themselves and the way that they engage with the kids. So I do agree in some way with that one. I do also come into the fact that I think also they're missing the mark. They're purely putting it on results and then still ignoring how a person's going to come into a classroom and connect with their students.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I'll grant you that. Another part of the article that I thought was interesting, that apparently during the review they discovered that some universities are offering courses that have what they call, in inverted commas, dial-up practicum, where the student is on their own and is given just a bunch of school numbers to ring up. Now, that's rubbish if that's the case. Now, I just think that's crap. I think like the relationship needs to be strong, like a link between uni, school, and the student for practicum, doesn't it?
And imagine if you're in your first year and you're given, here's some numbers of schools you can ring them up. You wouldn't know what to say, you wouldn't know what to do, and a school would rightly go, no thanks, and hang up. And that wouldn't be the student's fault. That'd be the university's fault. You can't dial a practicum. It's not dial a dinner or something where you ring in and go, I'll have, a couple of cheeseburgers or something like that. That's rubbish.
But I think you and I would agree that even at times in our course, you felt like practicum was few and far between. And it really made me think again about that relationship. And this is the point I'm going to make, is that uni students need that relationship with the university that connects to the practicum. So if they have a bad practicum for reasons that are out of their control, they've got the uni to go back to share that knowledge with and learn from. And then the school needs that strong relationship with the university, that if they get a pre-service teacher that's no good, that they can have that relationship with the university to share that information. It's a three-way thing. It can't be students on their own finding schools.
No, it can't be on them. It cannot be on them. And what I do want to go on with that in terms of contacting schools is that I think a uni should encourage the pre-service teachers to actually go and contact their school before they go. I love that. Now, I've got a student teacher, I'm going to have one in May, and I'll be looking for that. And I'll be looking for her to actually ring me up and, while I'm at school, and introduce yourself. Can I come up and actually meet you before the round and do these things? They should be encouraging these kids to still get on the front foot, but not have to get on the front foot without any direction. And I think that's really important.
Good point. And one of the other final points about it was that it said that they do want to change the postgrad courses to 2 years. I'm all for that.
Yeah, I'm all for that.
People can argue with me. I have a real problem with people going to do a postgrad for education that only takes 1 year after we've done 4 years. I just think, how can you cram in classroom management knowledge and all that stuff into 1 year?
To me, you can't. And I think people who get out and get a job have to get lucky in terms of they've got a good team around them to support them in a lot of things that they haven't been able to find out in other rounds. And the other thing as well I want to bring up before we finish as well, that ATAR score of the cutoff of 70 is great. But what about that person who gets 65 and goes, I'll just get into a course for a year and I'll just switch into teaching anyway. Now that's possible, isn't it? So maybe the test, test should be set up for people who want to come into the course late. They've done something else and now want to come in. That's fine, but we want you to sit this first. You've got to prove to us that you can come over and do it.
On a personal note, if I had have decided to do teaching immediately after year 12, which I didn't, my TER, as it was called then, would have been nowhere near the mark. But so I was I'll call it mildly mature age when I started. But I had to complete a form of general assessment test, and it was good. It really got me back in the game. I had to practice the tests beforehand. I did a lot of other things, but I think a national test like that, I think, is fair.
Yeah, so we'd love to hear about your thoughts on the communication and the relationship between the university, the pre-service teacher and the schools, and how you think would be a good way of making it better. Now, Rick, third topic for the evening. I want to ask you, as a child going to school, memories of your canteen?
Interesting, Adam. Some close friends from primary school would say that I was the worst party pie eater ever. I'm still rubbish with pies. Like, I always spill out when I eat them. Very interesting you say that. During the high school years, I used to, like, my grandparents used to live near the school. I used to actually go and visit them a lot. And have lunch with them. But in my VCE years, I came back to the canteen because I thought I need to hang around with my mates more. I used it quite prevalently. But, you know, I was fussy when I was a kid. Hot buttered roll was always on my paper bag. How boring is that?
But you know what? If it's not broke, don't fix it. I reckon for most of my primary school life, I reckon I had 2 party pies, a hot jam donut and a strawberry Big M, and that would have been every Friday. And I tell you what, that morning...
And you don't have diabetes. I can't believe it.
I can't believe it either. But that morning on Friday, I reckon, was useless to me because all I could think about was the 2 party pies with sauce, smashing that hot jam donut and sucking down that strawberry Big M, and then running it off while playing a game of footy.
Well, it's a nice treat for a Friday.
It is.
The reason why we're talking about canteens is that there has been some stuff in the news over the last month about big food companies muscling in on the school canteen industry.
I love that though. Sorry to interrupt you there, but muscling in on that, like it's like these big, just these big blokes come walking in going, yeah, we'll be buying that, we'll be having that. That's what it makes us sound like.
Or some guy in a big Coca-Cola box just bustling into the canteen and smashes the Prima off herself. You know, like
that's how it sounds like.
We aren't going to focus too much on big companies muscling in because we know that would happen because it would be a lucrative industry. A couple of interesting points in one of the articles was that the Canteen Association in Victoria severed ties with Coca-Cola 2 years ago and switched to Schweppes, because they had a healthier range.
Can I just ask you what that healthier range is?
Yeah, it doesn't say.
No, because they both serve fizzy drinks and they both do that stuff, so it can't be that different.
Now, Freedom Foods struck a deal recently with the association to supply nut-free snack bars. That's quite a good...
That'd be right up your alley, mate.
Yeah, well, it would be, I've got a mild nut allergy. What my experience as a teacher, Adam, I remember at my old school, the canteen was open 2 days a week. And currently, we don't have a canteen at a school with 600 students. That's not a permanent thing. But it's an integral part of the school. And we also know that some small schools don't have canteens. In fact, we had a tweet from someone just before tonight's episode saying we don't have one.
Yeah, and we don't have one either. And we actually outsource ours so that the order goes in on a Thursday. And we have parents who do a great job who will take that order in and then get it for the Friday as well. So that's always great. But we don't have a set spot. We don't have a set spot or the facilities to do something like that.
And that's the thing, isn't it? It relies on community support. And I know all the canteens that I've worked nearby to have always had parent support. And I even remember in the late 80s when I was a primary student, my mum would help at the canteen, and she did during the high school years. It's run by those people. If those people aren't available, and like you said earlier in the podcast, parents are working longer hours. If you can't get the hours, then maybe that's one of the reasons why schools can't open every day with canteens.
Yeah, and look, it's interesting because the canteen's always a funny one. I agree 100% with the push for healthier foods and encouraging students for that. But let's be honest. Let's really be honest. If a kid goes there and sees some apples and sees some organic chips or something like that, and then happens to see a Mars bar there as well, I can guarantee you 99 times out of 100 they're going for the Mars bar no matter what they've been told. So it's great that we want to make them eat better, but at the same time, are we being too hard on them? Are we trying to suppress them too much? So should they be allowed to live a little bit and have the Mars bar?
Someone said, a colleague at my old school said that to me once when I was complaining a bit about our school party day that we had at the end of the year, that I sort of thought it was a bit over the top, and they said, let them be a child for a day. Yeah, I can sort of understand that. I want to get back to canteens again because I tend to agree with you, and I think a lot of my students currently have great lunch boxes. I can see fruit, I can see all sorts of things. But you're right. I think when students go to the canteen during lunch playtime with a few coins, they're not buying fruit. I'd never see a kid walking out with an apple. Icy poles, granted on a hot day, but you see that rubbish popcorn with the icing sugar.
And I tell you, the only time you'd see a kid at a canteen buying an apple is if it's on a stick and covered in toffee. That's the only time they're walking out of a canteen with an apple. It just doesn't happen. And I know you would too. You have brain food at 10 o'clock. I get stuck in them. I'm pretty hard on my kids. They start pulling out a muesli bar. Is this brain food? No, it's not. Put it away. That's not brain food to me. It's got to be the vegetables or apples, and I really try and encourage that. But I don't want to sit on them all the time. I don't want to be at the canteen going, no, you got to buy the apples. Everyone leave the Mars bars. You can't do that.
No, it's a fine line. And I guess brain food is a school policy, isn't it? So
yes.
Muesli bars wouldn't be on that list. But I guess for our listeners, are we sounding like sort of two old fogies here? Because I think you're right. We do need to let them be students sometimes. And look, you and I know every Friday I have a bit of an easier lunch. Yep. I might go and get something from Baker's Delight. And sometimes it's nice to have one pie every couple of weeks, isn't it?
Something to look forward to.
It is.
And actually, I'm not able to do it so much anymore because where I work is so far away. But where I first started working in my teaching career, we had all the fast food joints literally the road over, and we had fast food Friday every Friday, and it was terrible because it was great because the food was awesome. But if you had a big thing of Chinese halfway through that last hour session on Friday, you want to have a nap. If you filled yourself up with some Chinese, you want to have a nap in the corner. But
it's a kind of dinner meal, isn't it?
It is kind of a dinner meal. But anyway,
we'd love to hear from our listeners about your canteen experiences. And look, I used to always support our canteen and buy like a wrap on a Friday. So we'd love to hear your thoughts on school canteens. Well, it's anecdote time, Adam, and it's your turn. Over to you.
It is. So this week I read an article in the paper that I thought came back to some things that I like to do at school. Now, I don't know about you, but I know I like to read the paper at school, and staff people do like to read the paper, don't they? It's actually a really good experience to sit down. Do you actually read the paper sometimes, and you kind of just want people not to talk to you? You're kind of in the middle of an article, and you can feel someone sit down. They want to have a chat, and you want to be nice and that sort of stuff. But I'll just leave me alone to read my paper. But
sure, because some people are very protective of their papers. I'm actually going through a patch where I'm not getting much of a chance to read them, but I know exactly what you mean. I do not want to be disturbed when I'm reading an article that I'm into.
Yeah, that's right. And also with my 5-6s over the last few years, I like to teach them life skills. In terms of, and they're very funny sort of life skills, particularly with the boys. I always talk to the boys about how to treat girls and make sure they treat them nicely and that sort of stuff. And if they were to go out on a date, for example, go, and they're funny ones that my dad used to joke with me, like go and do 50 lip ups. And and do these sorts of things to get yourself ready. So I was reading an article today in the paper that I shared with the other staff and couldn't believe it. There was a guy who actually just recently proposed to his girlfriend while at the movies watching 50 Shades of Grey. Now,
and you told this to your grade 2s? No.
I didn't tell this to the grade 2s, but I did share it with all the other females that I work with, and they were mortified that a guy. This was between the actual the previews and the actual movie itself. He had a PowerPoint presentation ready to show
on the big screen.
On the big screen. To ask this girl to marry him just before he was going to watch 50 Shades of Grey. Now, I was a little bit upset for two reasons. One, why is this guy going to watch 50 Shades of Grey with his girlfriend? Now, it said that he'd been with her for about 4 years. Now, you'd think after 4 years you could say, listen, love, I don't have to go to that anymore. And two, what a great opportunity, though, to put aside teaching for 10 minutes, to present this to your staff members and have a light-hearted moment with them and actually forget about talking about testing, forget about talking about three-way interviews, forget about that, and actually have a bit of a laugh and a light-hearted moment with each other and go, what is going on here? Because you do that, don't you? You see an article like that, you share it, and you actually forget about the job for 10 minutes.
Well, I was wondering where you were going with this tale, but you've brought it back beautifully because I agree. And sometimes when you have those light-hearted conversations with staff at a lunch break, it almost feels like a weight off the shoulders.
Yep.
And like when you've had a crazy day, sometimes it's like, oh wow, like we're talking about the film or silly things that people do, and it feels great. And I'm sure people who are listening can like relate to this.
Yeah, and I actually think you go back to your classroom. So if you do that at recess, I actually think you go back to your classroom less burdened. I think you go back with a bit of a lighter step and a smile on your face because you haven't sat in there having a yogurt or having your muesli bar or whatever it is you eat, and everyone's like, oh, so have you done that testing yet? Oh, have you run that sheet off? Oh, have you got this coming up? No, leave me alone. You can pull this out and go, oh, guys, have a look at this. Oh, what's going on here? And all of a sudden, recess is finished, and you go back going, oh, that was good fun. That was a great, discussion I had with my staff team.
And you mentioned before, do I get annoyed if I get interrupted reading the newspaper? I get annoyed if it's a big morning tea with all the staff, and you're having a great chat with a staff member that maybe you haven't had a chat to for a while, and someone interrupts to talk shop.
Yeah.
Now I know we're professionals and you've got to sometimes, but sometimes just wait.
Pick your moment.
Talk later. Email them.
Pick your moment. Can't you see what's going on there? Pick your moment. It's annoying.
So I'm talking about 50 Shades of Grey. I don't want to talk about spelling. No. By the way, I just used that as an example. I have no interest in that film at all.
No, you have more interest in the picture of 90 Shades of Toast. But that's coming out. But I do want to ask you. I want to finish this. I'm sorry to our listeners because I'm going to go off teaching for a second. Did you back in the day at any time when you've been with a partner? Have you actually had to go to a movie or done something like that you actually didn't want to go to? Because I'm happy to admit, before you start, back in the day when I was with my now wife, I actually had to go along and watch one of the Twilight movies because we weren't at a stage in the relationship yet where I felt confident enough to say, no, I'm not going to that. And I went along and watched it, and I couldn't get that 2.5 hours back. But I had to go. I had to put up with it.
I remember going with a girl when I was 18 to see Titanic, and I was reluctant about that for some reason. I think it was because I'd heard about all the gushing about the love story, but I ended up loving it because all the ship sinking. And,
so we've had both ends of the spectrum where you love that, and I wanted to gouge my own eyes out while sitting through Twilight. So, anyway, look, if we'd love to hear your comments about the lightheartedness. What's some things that you really enjoy in the staff room, and if you have or have not seen 50 Shades of Grey, and also to our male listeners. If your partner, if you've got one, wanted you to go and see 50 Shades of Grey, would you actually go and see it? I'd love to hear about that. So, Rick, that brings to an end episode 25.
Episode 25, Adam, and I just want to give a quick little shout out to last week in our episode. We talked about the Safe Schools Coalition of Victoria and what they're trying to do. The great stuff they're trying to do for schools. And as it turns out, last night we had a presentation after the kids went home from the Safe Schools Coalition, and now our school is part of the coalition and has signed up. And I'm just very proud, Adam. It was a fantastic presentation. Trying to reduce homophobia and transphobia in schools, and just making it all inclusive, and it just felt great. It was a fantastic presentation, and I just hope that more Victorian schools get on board.
And listen, mate, it can only be a positive thing. Reducing homophobia and transphobia in schools, to me, there is no negative about that. I think it's a really positive thing, and I think if more schools can get on board, then it's going to get out there more, and that's going to be reduced. So I think that's fantastic. I'm really proud of your school for jumping on board.
It was great. So go and check them out if you don't know much about them. They're on Twitter, Facebook, and they have their own website.
And there we go. Yeah. So look, before we do wrap it up, too, we want to say thank you. We've had some wonderful support in the last couple of weeks on Twitter, on Facebook. People supporting us, sharing what we do to other people. We do it for you guys, really, and we do want to say thank you for that wonderful support. It certainly doesn't go unnoticed. If you could keep doing it, that'd be absolutely sensational.
Sure would.
Yeah. So from me, Adam Lavaz,
me, Rick Kayla Thompson, and we've been 2 regular teachers.